of the Delta Conservancy, and welcome all who've joined us here in person and all those that are joining telephonically. And we'll go about calling the roll in just a moment to establish a quorum, but just would note that this meeting is being conducted as a hybrid format, and to maximize public safety while maintaining transparency and public access, members of the public can choose to participate either by telephone, using the numbered access code on the agenda, or in person at the location listed above. People attending in person will be required to adhere to the site's health guidelines, which could include wearing masks, health screening, or social distancing. Questions of public comment can be addressed to contact at deltaconservancy.california.gov prior to and during the meeting. And just for those, if you're on the line, you already know, but joined by teleconference is 1-877-402-9753, and the access code is 375-2086. Of course, everybody knows that that's on the line, but nonetheless, I don't maybe unnecessary to read that. So with that, the meeting is called to order, and welcome, and would ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to have 15 roll calls today. If you're on the phone, if you're going to call for a vote, could you just remind me of your name? Because we're going to have a lot of them today. Chair Natoli.
Here.
Vice Chair Matsuyama is absent. Mitchoff, Supervisor. Here. Supervisor Miller is absent. Supervisor Mashburn. Supervisor Provenza.
Here.
Board Member Miller. Gail.
Here, on the phone.
Gotcha. Board Member Cash.
Here.
Board Member Winternitz.
Present.
And last but not least, Board Member Sandoval.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here.
Okay. And I would just say, for those that are on the phone, as we go into discussion items, feel free just to weigh in. We don't have any way to really acknowledge that. So just, and I know that you're not shy, so just verbally jump in as we get into discussion. Yes?
I forgot to call for liaison advisors.
Okay.
Visiting with us today.
Yes, Mark
Marge
Fuller with Yolo Basin Foundation.
Okay.
Anyone on the phone?
Anyone on the phone? Liaison advisors?
Steve Chappelle with the Pacific Shores Conservation District, but I'll be stepping off before agenda item 9.
Okay. Excellent. And Eric is supposed to be here too. Come on in. Just starting out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Again, welcome and good morning to everyone. So with that, we'll move into the agenda. We have a fairly significant order of business, and part of that will be the board elections in just a moment. But first, we'll go to public comment for, I guess, items that are not on the agenda under new business. So is there anyone either here present and or on the phone that wish to comment on any item that's not on the agenda? All right. Seeing none and hearing none, then that'll take us into board item number 4, which is board elections. You want to give a quick overview?
Sure.
Campbell?
Good morning, everyone. Campbell Ingram, Executive Officer. Good to see everyone here again. We hold the elections for chair and vice chair every July. By statute, the chair must be one of the 5 county supervisors. Both positions typically serve 2 one-year terms. But due to current circumstances, Chair Supervisor Don Natoli will be retiring in January after 28 years, I believe, on the Board of Supervisors. So we will be holding chair elections for the chair today. Supervisor Mashburn has expressed interest in serving as the chair, and Sandy Matsumoto, who unfortunately is on vacation today, has expressed interest in continuing to serve for another year as vice chair. So with that, I would turn it back over to the chair for nominations.
All right, then I'd open the floor for nominations. Dolly?
I nominate Supervisor Mashburn for chair and Sandy Matsumoto for vice chair.
Okay, I thought Leo, I see Leo is a second on that. Anyone on the phone? So the nomination's been put in place, but we can nominate others if there's any interest. All right, seeing none.
This is Gail Miller. No other nominations nominations, but just a deep gratitude to our chair and for your decades of service. We really appreciate all you've done for the Delta
Great.
and the Delta Conservancy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate those comments. So I'll be around till the end of the year, just being in a little different role here and elsewhere. So, okay, thank you very much. All right, with that then, I'll close the nominations and then I'll ask the clerk to only ask if there's any public comment. All right, seeing none in the room. Any on the phone? All right, if not, then I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the question, please.
Supervisor Natoli.
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchoff.
Yes. Yes.
Supervisor Mashburn.
Aye.
Taking it. Supervisor Provenza.
Aye.
Board Member Miller.
Hi.
Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz.
Aye.
And Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Okay, there's 8 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay, very good. Well, the deed is done. I want to just thank the staff for their efforts, certainly not just during my tenure, but in all the years I've had a chance to serve on the Conservancy. And I know you're in good hands with Chair Mashburn, and certainly Sandy Matsumoto has been a very capable vice chair. I know we had some work this year that we did, obviously, with the lands, the drought response, and a lot of review. There was a committee that did a lot of good work, but I know Sandy and I were involved in that. So with that, Mitch, congratulations. I'll turn the gavel over to you, and the rest of it's yours.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Don. Thank you. And thank all of you. I'm very appreciative, and big shoes to fill, and 28 years of them. Stomp around this Delta, but absolutely going to do my best to do that and carry the torch and make sure that we take care of our most precious resource around here.
Great.
Right? So thank you.
Thanks, Mitch.
To that end, I guess the next item up is the consent calendar. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar? Anybody? Anybody want to pull anything from the consent calendar? No, I don't reckon. All right. Well, then I guess I would take a motion and a second if we got one on the consent. There's a motion.
I'll move to approve.
From Leo.
Gail Miller, second.
Gail, second. Can we get a roll, man?
Okay, I'm going to go backwards. Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Board Member Winternitz.
Yes.
Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Miller. Gail. Supervisor Provenza.
Aye.
Supervisor Mashburn.
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchoff.
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes, the motion carries.
All right, we're smoking through this. Let's see here.
Oh, just you wait. So positive.
That looks like the executive officer's report is up.
Okay.
Campbell, it's all
Good morning
yours.
again, everyone. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but not the first part. The first part, we're going to take a little bit of time, and that's the staffing update. So we all knew this day would come. Sadly, today we have to say our final goodbyes to Deborah Custic. Deborah's been the Deputy Executive Officer for the past 5.5 years. She's just contributed so much to the Conservancy. Her attention to detail and knowledge of state government, her ability to mentor and coach staff, her ability to handle Conservancy operations with professionalism and calm resolve is really just unsurpassed. And so we're just really going to miss her. We had a goodbye luncheon with staff last week, and it was great to hear all the staff just talk about how much they appreciated her mentoring and what they've learned from her. All of us, their tears were held back, but it's going to be sad to see you go, Deborah. Her last day actually was the 15th of July, but she worked all last week and a good bit of this week, and she's here, so we really appreciate the transition time too. We wanted to get Deborah something special, and so we got this print from a local artist, Elaine Bowers, and we think it will certainly remind Deborah of her time with us here at the Conservancy. Oh, wow. Because it's just that beautiful shot of the Sacramento River with Mount Diablo in the back.
Yep.
so you won't be able to forget us. This is actually, Elaine's just an amazing local artist, and she does beautiful work, so we hope you'll treasure this, and we've all signed it. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to sign it, please feel free to do so on the back. So
Thank you
I'm going to
so
hand this off to Deborah, and at that point, if any board members or anyone else wants to make a comment, and then we'll give Deborah a final word.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. We had to hand it off to you.
And then as typical, I'm just giving stuff back to you.
I would say, as my time on the board here is also coming to a close soon, I believe. Deborah, when you came on board, we were juggling a lot of different things to how to figure out more grant funding and how to outreach better, and how to get our strategic plan to be a living document instead of a document on the shelf, and our implementation plan as well. And I think I can say on behalf of all the board members that you really helped us step up our game here, and became Campbell's right-hand person, and made the Conservancy what it is today. So I thank you for that. I thank you for your guidance and help when I was vice chair, and just wish you the best. And let me just say, you're going to have fun. I know you are. If you play as hard as you work, then you are going to have a great life. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much.
Deborah, I want to let you know I appreciate everything you've done. I think you really helped move forward the Delta Conservancy from its infancy. And I know when you're on vacation, I've seen Campbell quiver. So I know how important you are, and the significance of your work and all that you've done. I just wish you a real happy retirement.
Thank you, Leon. So much appreciate that.
Deborah, my time on this Conservancy has been short, but in that time, I'm very appreciative of all you have done to make sure we got through COVID and all those other crazy things we've had to do with the office and out in the field, and made sure that the gears kept turning and everything kept moving. And also, I want to thank you, because while I've been here a short time, I've been living in the Delta my whole life. And to know that there are people out there like you who are willing to commit their entire life, their career, to making sure that that sticks and that we have that Delta going forward and that my kids will enjoy it, is huge. I appreciate your commitment. I hope you enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope to be in the Delta warrant during that.
Deborah, I would just say you're an exceptional, I think, dedicated public servant, and obviously this isn't the only place in state government that you work throughout your career, but I think certainly your time here with the Conservancy has proven invaluable to advancing the work, certainly with administering some of the grants, and I think the product of a lot of the work that you, obviously along with your team here at the Conservancy, will continue to pay dividends for generations to come. I think to what others have said here, that it's not only in the present time in which you've served, it's that work has laid certainly a foundation, a strong foundation for, I think, bringing attention to the intrinsic and the important values of the Delta landscape, its people, its importance to the state of California, but certainly importance to all of the folks who live and work and come to visit, this tremendously awesome place. And so, I want to just thank you for that. And again, sometimes I'm sure laboring away, as you just said a moment ago, you have more chance to get out in the Delta, but laboring away on this would be a little hard to see what that meant. But I think when you look at the balance of all of the things that you touched during your tenure here with the Conservancy, it adds up to a lot. And again, it means a lot to the people of the Delta. And so I want to, again, take my opportunity here to thank you and to wish you good health and much happiness in your retirement, and enjoy life. And as I think Dolly said, that if you play as hard as you've worked over the years, you're going to have a great retirement. So
Well, thank you, Don. That means a lot, especially coming from you and your history and commitment to the civil service. So thank you.
thanks. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
I just really appreciate all you've done for the Conservancy, but also just
always keeping agency in the loop on everything. It's been very helpful, and the legacy will continue. It's just knowing that anytime we needed something, we could pick up the phone and you guys would get it done. And so I really appreciate that.
Oh.
And now the fun begins because you get to actually go out and see the work and see all the signs, the top one signs all over the document. Yeah, I was involved with that, I was involved with that. So enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been nice that it's been very reciprocal with agency, and it's the relationship between agency and conservancies has come a really long way in the last several years, and it's just so appreciated. Thank you. Well, I don't often write down what I'm going to say, but I knew if I didn't, I would be a disaster. So pardon me as I read from my notes. But you know, after starting out working at the Department of Conservation and then for the Department of Toxic Substances Control at the beginning of my career, I spent 25 years at Cal Recycle before coming to the Conservancy almost 6 years ago. And the Conservancy, as everybody said, has come so far in that time. It's certainly grown in terms of projects and funding. Nobody can really doubt that. But well, the work we do is so important. It's really enough so for me to make that leap at the end of my career. But it's never been just about the work. It's really about the people. I am not an emotional person. The people are at the heart and the soul of the Conservancy, and they have just grown into an amazing team. And I think they think critically, which you know, I think is so important. They ask hard questions, which I've always been appreciative for. And they're mindful of looking at things from a perspective other than their own. And they're passionate about what they do in the mission of the Conservancy, and that is so evident every day in how they show up, literally and figuratively. They work together to find the positive, even when things are tough. They never stop giving their all. And as we all know, the last few years have not been a picnic. And they have just shown up and just been so committed, personally and professionally. And you know, I don't think I'm surprising anybody that has, you know, had to turn something into me that I say I expect a lot, and I set the bar really, really high. And I've not done enough, nearly enough, to ensure that our team knows. That's only because I know what they're capable of. And I believe in them and have so much confidence in their abilities, even when they may not have that themselves. And they've risen to the occasion. I am so proud and humbled by the support they've shown to me. I have learned so much from them, and I'm grateful to each and every one of them for their patience and coaching in my own development. And I'm particularly grateful to our division managers, Brenda, who's not here, and Sarah, for their support and unwavering commitment and exceeding patience with me. To Brian for being open to me asking so many questions. And this may surprise some people, because if you send Brian an email, you'll get a 3-word answer. It's very helpful, a 3-word answer. But he also takes the time to remind, you know, and has demonstrated the need of him checking in on a human level. You know, I'll call and say, Brent, trying to be super respectful of his time, say, I have these 3 questions, and he's like, how are you? Hold on, how are you? And that's just been a really good reminder. And to our attorney, Nicole Rinke, who has kept us on the straight and narrow path while still letting us, you know, push the envelope and achieve our goals. So, and Campbell, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time working together. I think we've made a really good team, and your support has just been invaluable. I couldn't have done it without you, and you've allowed me to see things from a perspective I never would have otherwise. So I very, very much appreciate that. And to the board members, thank you so much for your commitment to the Delta and everything that we do. It's so important to have that support, and we couldn't do it without all of our board members. When I interviewed for this position, I said that to me, success is meeting a group of people where they are and helping them develop into a team and playing a meaningful leadership role as they advance and grow. And it's hard walking away, and I keep thinking about all the things I could have done or things I could have done better, but I feel really good ending my career with the feeling that I've had some measure of success in that regard. So as hard as it is to walk away, I'm going to. It's hard to leave this wonderful team and its mission, I feel good knowing that Campbell's steady leadership remains, and I'm really confident in turning this next phase over to Karen's capable hands. So thank you all for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. We're going to miss you. Here's to a great, long, happy, healthy retirement.
Thank you.
And now we get to shift to, that was bittersweet, but now we get to shift and introduce Karen sitting immediately next to you. Karen Burr is our new Deputy Executive Officer. Karen's coming to us from the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, where she's been for the last 12 years. She has done just fantastic work in really elevating the presence and the capacity and the funding level for the California RCDs, who, as you all know, are major partners for us and some of the projects that we work on. She's just got great experience throughout the state of California, and we are very excited to work with Karen and know that she's got big shoes to fill, but we're certain that she's going to step right in and do a wonderful job. So welcome, Karen. We're very glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I think that's the right word there, with the big shoes to fill. It's maybe the theme of the day today. But I'm really excited to jump in with the team. And I think, like Campbell said, I feel like the skill set that I bring to the position is really just taking the things I've been doing for the last 13 years and kind of taking a different angle on them and really being able to grow both for myself personally and for the organization. So I am really excited to be here and excited to get to pass the torch a little bit here in the next few weeks with you, and excited to work with you, Campbell, and really looking forward to joining the team.
Thanks. All right.
Campbell, if I could, I met Karen even before she went to work at the state. I think she was with the Slough House RCD and the RCDs in Sacramento County, and was early in her career, but obviously very talented and moved into the role she's been in now for a dozen years, and I was pleased to see you. I thought, oh, Karen, my gosh, I tell you. Anyway,
It's been a while.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Well, I'll tell you, I've gotten countless emails from people saying, what a great opportunity, what a great hire,
Nice.
And it's going to be really wonderful. So.
Great. Congratulations.
All right, so continuing on with introductions, Maya Garrett in the back corner there, waving hello, is our new Ecological and Community Programs Analyst. She started on the 18th of July. She's going to focus on initiation and management of the Conservancy's Community Enhancement Program. She's coming to us from the State Water Control Board. Next to Maya is Angie Shakya. I'm going to get that right eventually. She's our new Ecological Program Environmental Scientist. She started also on the 18th, and she will be focused on providing project management and closeout of the Conservancy's Prop 1 programs. And she's actually coming to us after just finishing up her graduate work at the University of Michigan. Go Blue. So we actually have another addition who also started on the 18th, but we didn't know she was starting at the time I wrote the Executive Officer's Report. But Geraldine Walker, she goes by Jerry, is a retired annuitant, and she's coming to us in an administrative capacity to help us with all the administrative efforts that we have going on. She's been with the state for over 37 years and has been retired since 2017, and really has some great experience, so we're looking forward to working with her.
It was a pretty magic date, July 18th.
Yeah.
You all came rushing.
And last on updates, I wanted to recognize Brenda Lusk, who fortunately for her, she's on vacation, but she's not with us today. But she's been promoted to Staff Services Manager 2. She was a Staff Services Manager 1 with us for a long time, 3 years, and she's just done exceptional work. And she will be the Administrative Manager for the Conservancy moving forward. And one of her first tasks is trying to backfill her position now. So congratulations to Brenda. All right, I am going to race through the rest of the program updates. Please feel free to ask any questions as I go. COVID update, we're back to, we have our policies in place. They have not been formally approved by the unions. But our policy is we're every other Monday, all staff are in the office all day. We meet together in the morning. And that is the extent of the requirement to be in the office. We know people will want to be in the office more than that. We've requested that people cover meetings in the office where appropriate and or outside the office. But we believe that we've proven through the last 2 years that we can do this remotely and for quality of life and hiring, retention. We think that's the best policy, and it's working quite well. We did do IT services update grant with Department of Water Resources that'll cover us for the next 3 years. I wanted to mention the nutria eradication. Nutria eradication is going exceedingly well. Hopefully people saw some press. There was a nice article in the Bee last week that also gave recognition to the Delta Conservancy for contributing $10 million of the $13 million that are in the program. That they just seem to have a good handle on it, and the numbers are declining, so that's really positive. What I mentioned for the Delta Drought Response Pilot Program, we continue to do the work that we previously committed to, which is going out and doing site visits with the landowners, really learning and having great exchanges with them, and monitoring the efficacy of the practices that they've employed. Also wanted to let people know that, as of yesterday, the Department of Water Resources will be transferring $12 million to us to run the program again this year. And so we are actively planning that program right now, figuring out how we're going to do the cost structure, with the expectation that we will open it in October 1 of this year, which is far better. Last year, just because of timing, it wasn't until January, and that's really challenging for the farmers because they're making planting decisions well before that. So we think that'll be much more effective this year. The Delta Carbon Program, I've been threatening and for a long time to give a very long detailed update on the Delta Carbon Program, and this didn't seem like the meeting. We will do that in October. But just to say that we continue our work to look for projects that essentially try to re-wet the deepest parts of the Delta, the most organic soils that are most deeply subsided. You can do that by managed wetlands where the land's already just too wet to farm, or conversion to rice. We have quite a few pilot projects that are moving forward in that regard, and the governor's May revise included a pretty substantial amount of funding, up to $41 million for us to do that work in the Delta. So we're hopeful that through August, the legislature will finalize that package and that money will hit our budget. And so in the October board meeting, we'll do a much more detailed overview of where we're headed and how we hope to spend that money in the future. Delta Fish Friendly Farming, you're going to get an overview of that from Rachel on agenda item 13, which reminds me, sorry, I just want to make it clear, we didn't do this in the introduction. We're going to pull agenda item 12 again. That is the exemption for the project, and we'll talk about that as we get later. Delta Science Coordination, I think I'm just going to hit this very at the high level. I mean, we continue to work with the science community to advocate ecological restoration. I think it's important to note that Chapter 4 of the Delta Plan is now out and has been approved. It now goes through a rulemaking process, but that establishes targets, long-term targets for restoration of the Delta that will be very central to the work that we do. It also authorized the Restoration Subcommittee of the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee. So as you know, that's actually kicked off. Rachel's helping kick that off. And we just yesterday had our second planning meeting for the first Delta Forum, which will be an opportunity really to welcome the Delta community and to really understand what's in Chapter 4, how we think we're going to achieve that through time, and also do a retrospective on the restoration that's been done in the Delta to date, and start to really develop a process where we can actively solicit their input and participation in restoration processes. Invasive Species Coordination continues. The DIS team meets again on August 9th. And I think I will leave it at that unless there are questions. There were no board directives from the May 25th meeting. Any questions on the programmatic side? All right, got through that quickly. Thank you. So next up is the budget report. Turn that over to Jessica.
There we go. The budget report is agenda item 6.3. Typically at this time of year I can present a report for 11 months, but our accounting was quick this year, so I have a preliminary report for the entire year, July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. The personal services are pretty much complete. The operating expenditures and equipment are not complete. They do close down the budget the first week of June, so we aren't able to enter some of that information. Because this agenda is huge, I'm going to just leave it at that unless anyone has any questions. Okay.
All right, there was no correspondence, so with that, that completes the Executive Officer's report. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir. And that moves us to number 7 here, which is the Prop 1 Ecosystem Restoration and Water Quality Grant Program update. Dr. Fox.
Right up here.
All right. Good morning, board members. I'm Trevor Fox, an environmental scientist with the Conservancy. It's my pleasure to present to you agenda item number 7, the Proposition 1 project update. Before I give an update on the existing Prop 1 projects, I want to take a note that we'll be covering the Prop 1 Cycle 5 grant applications in detail during today's meeting. But first, I just want to give an update on the previous ones. I'll briefly highlight 2 of our current Proposition 1 projects. As always, we've completed, we have the complete update available in the board packet. At the top of the Proposition 1 staff report, page 2, board packet page number 14, we have the Delta Waterways Habitat Restoration. That's a Cycle 4 funded planning project, ID number 1804. At the previous board meeting, the amendment was approved, and we're expecting to execute that amendment no later than the 31st of this month, July 31st, 2022. Next up, the Three Creeks Parkway Restoration Project, Cycle 3 funded implementation project. That's on page 5 of the board packet of the Prop 1 update, board packet page number 14. The idea is 1711, and the funding period for that project is closed out as of June 30th, 2022. And the Conservancy is working to wrap that up. All right. Moving on, we have the item number 9.1, which is the P1 through 5 summary staff recs.
No, nope, we'll do the community.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's it for the Proposition 1 program update. Not too many updates since the last board meeting. Projects are ongoing, things are going well.
Okay.
We'll have the big one in 9.1.
Yeah, the big one's coming up. Yeah, we got to break everything into 6 pieces.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I remember. I got briefed on that. Yeah. All right.
I'm saving the best.
All right, well, that moves us to the Community Enhancement Grant Program update.
Thanks, Jess. Good morning, board members.
Morning.
My name is Martha Ozenoff, and I'm the Community Project Supervisor. I need to get my glasses on to know who I am. I'm here to present Agenda Item 8, the Community Enhancement Grant Program Update, which can be found starting on page 25 of your agenda packet. This report highlights projects through Proposition 68 and the Climate Access and Restoration CAR Program Fund. I'm happy to report that we have 8 executed grants. The projects are detailed on pages 25 and 28 of the agenda packet, but to provide a few highlights, Proposition 6804, the first Proposition 68 grant that we executed, is working on 35% design plans and community outreach for the City of Pittsburgh Boat Launch Planning Project. Proposition 6811, the Asian American Heritage Park Implementation Project, is working with their landscape architect on final design plans. And CAR 1, with the Pacific Flyway Fund, is finalizing the project engineering and landscape plans. We also have one grant that has been awarded but yet to be executed, the Freeport Gateway Monuments Project that was approved at the May board meeting. We will be sending the grant agreement to the County of Sacramento by the end of the week for their review, and we anticipate them to approve the agreement at their September 28th Board of Supervisors meeting. And we expect to have a signed agreement in place by our October board meeting in time for Don Natoli. For more information on this project, please see page 28 of your agenda packet. In addition to these projects, we have 4 working proposals, 2 of which are before the board for consideration later. CAR 2, the Bees Lake Public Access Project with the City of West Sacramento, and CAR 3, the Big Break Regional Shoreline Restoration and Public Access Planning Project. The other two proposals are Project ID 6814, the Delta Aquatic Center of Stockton, a planning grant with the Community Foundation of San Joaquin, and CAR 4, a proposal from the Metropolitan Water District for a wetlands restoration project on Bolden Island. Details from these proposals can be found on page 28 and 29 of your agenda packet. Additionally, since the time that we drafted this report, we've received a concept proposal from Yolo Basin Foundation for public access improvements in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. With that, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take comments or questions.
I just wanted to note that we did execute the Clarksburg Schoolhouse renovation this just last week, I believe. So.
On the 18th. Should have bought a lottery ticket that day.
Conservancy holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mother.
All right. Now we're on to 9. This is the big one. Everybody buckle up. All right. It's like 6 pieces, right, Doc?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Please.
All right. Well, you're on.
Okay, yeah, Rachel Wigginton, thank you for joining me up here. So good morning, board members. My name is Sarah Lesmeister. I'm the Ecological and Community Programs Manager here at the Delta Conservancy. It is my pleasure today to bring to you our Proposition 1 Cycle 5 considerations of staff recommendations for award. This starts on page 31 of your agenda packet. Before we dive into specific project proposals, I want to provide some context about our Cycle 5 solicitation, give you some background or a reminder as well. So the Cycle 5 proposal solicitation opened in July of last year. It's a 2-step process here at the Conservancy. We require concept proposals in which we review and provide feedback to applicants, and then full proposal submissions. So in December, on December 15th, we had received a total of 8 full proposals, and they were requesting approximately $4.7 million. As Martha mentioned in the Community Enhancement Program update, we are presenting consideration of awards for 2 of these proposals under our Climate Access and Restoration funding. Both projects, both the Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project, and the Big Break Regional Shoreline Restoration and Public Access Planning Project, submitted proposals to both the Proposition 68 and the Proposition 1 funding programs. We are pleased to bring before the board consideration of award for both these projects as agenda items 10 and 11 of this meeting, during which we'll go over those projects in more detail. So back to the Proposition 1 Cycle 5 process. Once full proposals were received, there was a multi-stage evaluation process that included programmatic, environmental, administrative, and external reviews of each proposal, during which the proposals were scored using the board-approved evaluation criteria. To be considered for award, proposals must score more than 75 out of the 100 points available. In this solicitation, I'm pleased to announce that all of the proposals that we received scored above the 75-point threshold. And also I want to point out that the average score across all reviewers is highlighted on each of the specific projects' recommendation. All of the proposals being recommended for the Prop 1 Cycle 5 funding provided scientific justifications using best available science for their project. Each project proposal incorporated application of the Delta Plan's adaptive management framework and also addressed climate change resiliency in their project. In addition to the proposal evaluation, Conservancy staff conducted local notifications by contacting local governments and districts, water agencies, and tribal nations via the local notification process. We did this to receive comments and ensure that the projects had support in our communities. To date, we have not received any comments received through the local notification process, and I do want to highlight that our local notification process closed, I believe, on Monday, so or that's generally closed. So to summarize today, before we get into the specific details, the Conservancy staff recommend funding all 6 of the projects that total $3,035,255. This is out of the $3,498,133 million that was available for our Proposition 1 Cycle 5 awards. And so once again, before we dive into specific projects, we have a bunch of different environmental compliance scenarios, so I'm going to have Rachel, who's over here today, provide us a little bit of an overview and set us up for some context here.
So good morning, board members. My name is Rachel Wigginton, and I'm a senior environmental scientist with the Conservancy. And as Sarah said, I'm going to be leading you through the different environmental compliance scenarios for the projects that are before you for consideration today. So just as a quick reminder, the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, requires project proponents to consider the potential environmental impacts of a project. CEQA processes are spearheaded by a lead agency, who is the primary public agency responsible for the project, and reviewed by various responsible agencies who either fund or permit those projects. For the projects presented in this agenda item, 4 of the 6 are considered projects under CEQA. In fulfilling the Conservancy's role as a responsible agency for these projects, staff have reviewed the environmental compliance documentation provided by the applicants and prepared for board consideration summaries of this information, which can be found in the following staff reports, along with board resolutions making CEQA responsible agency findings where they are needed. Turn it back over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Rachel. So overall, the proposals that we received were really well prepared. They all met programmatic goals and had minimal concerns. In the scenarios where there were some issues, they are noted in the additional consideration sections of each of the specific projects. Before we dive into it, I also want to note, so you guys are aware, that Trevor and I may be switching off back and forth between these just to divide up some of the work for us. Additionally, or finally, we would like we've done in the past, for other considerations of award, we have prepared suggested motion language for each project proposal at the end of that agenda item. So at this point, are there any questions about the broader Prop 1 cycle time process? No? Okay, we're ready to get started then? Great. Wonderful. So I am going to be doing number 1, or the first project today. So the first project proposal I'm pleased to present for you today for your consideration of award is Project ID 2204, titled Little Franks Track Invasive Weed Removal and Restoration Project. This implementation project is located in Contra Costa County and is proposed by the Contra Costa County, or excuse me, the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. This agenda item, or this item, is on page 35 of your packet. Conservancy staff recommend that the board approve up to $427,706 in grant funding for this proposal. As a bit of a project summary, the goal of this project is to test and identify workable solutions to remove invasive weeds, improve habitat value, and prevent further spread of invasive weeds in the Franks Track area and nearby restoration sites. The site is located in the Franks Track State Recreational Area, which is primarily underwater. Excuse me. It wanted to save on here, okay. Which is primarily underwater, except for some of the areas, including this project site, which is actually less than 5 acres. This project is in partnership with the California State Parks and would determine the extent of the invasive plant problem and outline a path to addressing long-term invasive weed issues in the larger Franks Track region. They would do this by removing invasive weeds, promoting native plant reestablishment, enhancing habitat, protecting and improving water quality, and restoring delta plant habitats along levees. So cost share, the total cost share for this project is 11%, and this is coming from cost share match from the applicant for in-kind services from the landowner, and the landowner is California State Parks here. As with all of the Proposition 1 Cycle 5 proposals that we bring before the board today, this project is consistent with the specific actions and priorities identified in the Proposition 1 bond language, the California Water Action Plan, the Conservancy's governing statute, and the Conservancy's 2022 through 2027 strategic plan. The applicant provided letters of support from various stakeholders, and those are listed out in the staff report. So additional considerations for this project. There are two additional considerations. The first one, Conservancy staff would like to work with the applicant, or need to work with the applicant, to resolve some issues with them purchasing their equipment, more specifically regarding their boat and motor. We need to do this so we can meet applicable state laws and policies. Second, there were some concerns about the use of herbicides that may not be feasible or may require additional CEQA requirements. If the project area contains species of concerns, Conservancy staff will work with the applicant to ensure that the mechanical removal of those weeds will be used in locations where species of concern are present. And then Rachel, do you want to do the environmental compliance?
Absolutely. Good morning again, board members. The Little Franks Tract Invasive Weed Removal and Restoration Project is the first of your CEQA scenarios for today. So the applicant, Contra Costa Resource Conservation District, acted as the lead agency and prepared a notice of exemption linked in the staff report, which cited the CEQA categorical exemption for small restoration projects of less than 5 acres. As a responsible agency for a categorically exempt project, the board isn't obligated to take any action unless there is a reason to disagree with the exemption findings. Staff have reviewed the CEQA documentation provided by the applicant and agree with the finding of exemption, providing the project is implemented in an area without species of concern or mechanical means are used for invasive species removal, as Sarah previously described.
Great. So, in summary, we are pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there is suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item for your consideration. But before we proceed, I'm happy to take any questions on this project. Leo?
Yeah, so you said the project area is a bit less than 5 acres. So this is really an experiment taking place to see how to remove, perhaps manage invasive weeds. The project proponents prepared to discuss whatever it is they find. What is the term of the project itself? 15 years? Is that the?
This one would be, so there's a little, all the projects would be 15 years. So, right, they would create an adaptive management plan and a monitoring plan for the area for that duration. One of the things that we want to work with the applicant potentially is identifying if it should be more of a pilot implementation project versus a traditional implementation project as well. Right. But yeah, the 15-year requirement, and I think that would be met through the development of their monitoring management plan.
I guess my question goes to the framework and the adaptive management program becomes really important because what you learn then, needs to be provided to other state agencies who are working on the same kind of problems as the applicant prepared to do this.
Oh yes, absolutely, and we can write that into the grant agreement as well, that they include in participation and engagement with other stakeholders. I would say all stakeholders.
Thank you.
Great. Any other additional questions, comments?
All right. Well, then I guess if there's not any other additional comments, we should ask for public comment, if there's any. Hearing none, I would accept the motion.
Move approval.
I'd like Supervisor Mitchell, I'd like to move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can we get a roll?
We can. Are we going to read the motion?
Yes, you need to read the motion.
You want to go ahead and read the motion?
I'll go ahead and read that.
Yes,
yeah, that would be helpful.
Move to award up to $427,706 to the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District from Proposition 1 Grant Program for the Little Franks Tract Invasive Weed Removal and Restoration Project, conditional upon the items noted in the additional consideration section of the staff recommendation.
Excellent. And then what I didn't recognize is Nicole. Are you on the line? Okay.
Yes, I am.
There you go. And I'm sorry I didn't call you for roll. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay. So we're going to head and do a roll call. Supervisor Sandoval.
Board member Sandoval says aye.
It's going to be a long day.
That's okay.
Board member
Whatever you want to call me.
Yes.
Board member Cash.
Aye.
Board member Miller.
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza. I'll come back to him. Supervisor Mashburn.
Aye.
Oh, thanks, Jim. And I got Mashburn. Supervisor Midshaw.
Yes.
And Supervisor Natoli. That is 8 ayes, and the motion carries.
All right. One down.
One down,
One
5 to
down.
go.
Okay, I'm not sure if the applicant is online, but we do want to provide the opportunity for them to say, a minute or any words or two. I think it might be Ben Weiss online.
Yeah.
Hi, Ben.
I'm actually here. This is Chris.
Oh, hello.
I'm Executive Director with Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Conservancy staff for helping us through the process. And we look forward to working on this project and sharing our findings and doing the good work in the Delta and continuing our partnership with the Delta Conservancy. And big shout out to Karen Burr. Hey, Karen.
Great, thank you.
So thanks, everybody.
Okay, so that wraps up 2204. Are we ready for up next, 2207? Great, so this one, Trevor is going to take over this project.
So the next proposal we'll be looking at today for your consideration is project ID number 2207. That's the Yellow Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project. This implementation project is located in Yolo County and is being proposed by Ducks Unlimited. This item can be found on page 39 of your agenda packet. The Conservancy staff recommend that the board approve up to $887,516 in grant funding for this proposal. The proposed work is the final phase of a broader project that renovates the hydrologic infrastructure of the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area. This will serve to restore about 220 acres of seasonal wetland, enhance the water management capabilities of the site, and help maintain 1,800 acres of existing seasonal wetland habitat in the greater area. Phase 1 of this project was completed in summer of 2021. This project, Phase 2, will provide improved water control structures, including a new pump station, canal grading to assist in best soil management practices, along with improving wildlife-friendly agricultural efforts. This project also creates additional public access to the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area by an average of 7 days a year, by reducing flooding caused by insufficient capacity in existing drainage infrastructure. The previous phase of the project was funded in part by the Delta Conservancy. That was project ID number 1503. And I'd also like to note that the Yellow Bypass Wildlife Area is currently providing opportunities as a result of the previous work for the public to view unique wildlife, including the Mexican free-tailed bat and migratory waterfowl and bird species. On to cost share. The total cost share amount for this project is 53%. Primarily as cost leveraging from state funds from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. This project is consistent with the specific actions and priorities identified in Proposition 1, the California Water Action Plan, and the Conservancy's governing statute and the Conservancy's 2022 through 2027 strategic plan. The applicant provided letters of support from several state and local partners listed in the staff report. And there are no additional considerations to cover for this project. Rachel, would you mind taking over for the environmental compliance section?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. So the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project Phase 2 is the next of the CEQA scenarios you're going to be considering today. This project is not exempt under CEQA. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife is the lead agency, and the Delta Conservancy, as a funder, would be a responsible agency. CDFW prepared an initial study and mitigated negative declaration in order to analyze all potential adverse environmental impacts of the project. The initial study found potential significant project impacts on air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, and hydrology and water quality. However, CDFW also determined all identified impacts could be reduced to less than significant levels through mitigation measures which were outlined in the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. This initial study and mitigated negative declaration examined work for both phases of the project, phase 1 of which was funded by the Delta Conservancy's Proposition 1 Grant 1503, as Trevor mentioned previously. So as a responsible agency for a project that is not exempt from CEQA, the Delta Conservancy Board is required to make independent findings and file a notice of determination. Back in 2018, when the Proposition 1 1503 grant was approved, the board adopted Board Resolution 2018-01 and filed the required notice of determination, which can be found on pages 43 and 45 of your board packet respectively. These CEQA actions fulfilled the Conservancy's role as a responsible agency for both Phase 1, which is Proposition 1503, and Phase 2, which is the proposal before you today.
Thanks, Rachel. Are there any questions at this time?
I just want to mention that this is just a really great project. We funded in part the first phase. If you go out there on any given weekend, you will see people out there utilizing this space. The water management is the heart of the wildlife area, and this has just really improved its ability to function, so it's been a great project.
All right, I don't see,
one comment.
we do have a question.
When everything gets back to normal, can we go out and see some of these?
Yes.
Yes, hopefully, we'll talk about that for our October meeting.
That would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah,
I would love to see it.
Jim Provenza, I did have a comment. Thank you for this. Something that Yolo County's been working on and supporting for years, and it does relate to the Fish Passage Project, and that there will be additional water in the wildlife area, and improving the drainage is really significant to not only protecting the wildlife area, but enhancing it for the future. So we're really looking forward to the completion of the project. And I would like, at the appropriate time, would like to make the motion.
All right, well, we're almost there, Jim. We're going to open up for public comment if nobody else in the room here has any questions. Seeing none. Any public comment? None there either. All right, Jim, you're on, sir.
Well,
we want to read it first. Yeah.
If we're ready for the motion, I have some suggested language here. We'd like to move to award funding up to $887,516.29 to Ducks Unlimited from the Proposition 1 grant program for the Yolo Bypass Area Habitat and Drainage Improvement Project, Phase 2.
All right, now you're on, Jim.
Yeah, I so move.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Provenza and a second by Mashburn. Supervisor Natoli.
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchoff. Karen, you there? Okay.
Yes.
There you go. Chair Mashburn. There
Yes.
you go. Let's see if I can get it right. Supervisor Provenza.
Aye.
Board Member Miller.
Aye.
Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz.
Yes.
And Board Member Sandoval.
Aye.
The motion carries with 8 ayes.
Excellent.
All right.
So exciting.
I don't know if we have anyone from DU online who would want to say anything real quick.
Yes, please, thank you. This is Aaron Wilson, Ducks Unlimited. Thank you so much to staff and board members for continuing supporting the project. Delta Conservancy's been the first money in on this project and the last money to get us over the finish line on a multiple $1 million restoration project that has huge support from lots of project partners, California Fish and Wildlife, Yolo County, Yolo Basin Foundation, Metropolitan Water District, Southern California, and Conservancy Solutions. It's been a huge partnership and ongoing. And certainly, Ducks Unlimited and other staff and partners are more than happy to meet with any board or staff that want to visit the site. The site is currently under construction for Phase 2 for the CDFW cost share component. So if you want to go out and see some stuff under construction, now is the time to do it. So reach out if you would like a site tour. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right, Doc. You're up on number 3.
Okay, Trevor, will you take over 2208 and let us?
Absolutely. All right, so the next project proposal I'll be presenting to you for consideration of board is project ID number 2208, titled Elias Creek Habitat Restoration Project. This is an implementation project located in Solano County. It has been proposed by the Solano County Resource Conservation District. This item can be found on page 46 of your agenda packet. The Conservancy staff recommend that the board approve up to $359,639 in grant funding for this proposal. The proposal project will generate 20 acres of woodland riparian habitat by planting over 1,180 native trees and shrubs, 100 pounds of wildflower seeds, and 25,000 forb sedge plugs along the northern bank of the Elias Creek in Solano County. Further, invasive plants such as the giant reed will be controlled throughout the project site, and the 20-acre project site will provide valuable wildlife habitat by generating riparian habitat with protective shade, secure nesting habitats, and showcase effective conservation efforts on working land. The planning phase of the project was previously funded in part by the Delta Conservancy, and that would have been project ID 1804. The cost share total is 20% of the budget, with additional funds coming from Sources including the applicant, the landowner, a federal grant, and a nonprofit organization. This project is consistent with the specific actions and priorities identified in Prop 1, the California Water Action Plan, and the Conservancy's governing statute and strategic plan. The local support is strong for this project. Proposal demonstrates local support and includes a resolution from the project's County Board of Supervisors. The applicant provided letters of support from all cost-sharing and cost-leveraging partners while developing close relationships with various stakeholders outlined in the staff recommendation. There are some additional considerations for this project. The Conservancy requires the landowners sign a landowner access agreement to allow access to project sites. Additionally, the Conservancy requests that the land access agreement be recorded with the county against the property deed. This requirement reduces risk to the Conservancy in the event the landowner sells their property by requiring that the new landowner would also allow access to the property for the project. Under certain circumstances, the Conservancy has in the past waived this requirement. Prior to submitting the proposal, the applicant shared with Conservancy reluctance from the landowner to record the landowner access agreement against the property deed with Solano County. The applicant has a long and successful partnership with the landowner and stated the landowner recently received a Natural Resource Conservation Service Environmental Quality Incentive Program grant, which also requires a 15-year contract. The NRCS grant is for separate conservation-related work, but at the same project site. The land has been owned by the same family for over 100 years, and the owners have a long history of supporting conservation efforts. The applicants request that the Conservancy allow the landowner to sign the land access agreement, but waive the requirement that the landowner record the land access against the property deed. Given the landowner's longstanding commitment to conservation, their partnership with the applicant, and the corresponding grant from the NRCS, Conservancy staff recommends granting their request. At this time, I'll hand you off to Rachel for the environmental compliance.
Thank you, Trevor. The Unitas Creek Habitat Restoration Project is considered
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, it's Gail Miller. On that, the land, I'm not sure I understand that. So it would be, how would the deed be recorded then?
The deed would not be recorded with the county. We would just have a landowner access agreement on file from the landowner through the applicant.
I don't know that makes, have we done that before?
Yes, we have in certain scenarios waived the requirement to record the landowner access agreement with the deed in the county.
What's the reason not to record it? Other than that the landowner doesn't want it. I mean, what is the benefit to the landowner?
What is the benefit to the landowner to not to record? That's where there's just a lot of reluctance from small private landowners to record anything really against their property with the county. It's, from my understanding, and maybe we can have some, or the applicant share that a little bit more, there's just hesitancy to get into that kind of agreement with the state and the property deed. And this is, as we've continued to work with small, like working lands, a concern that's coming up more and more frequently for us at the Conservancy. So.
Well, we feel that given the landowner access agreement, the requirement for 15 years, and the interaction with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which also requires a 15-year commitment on there, that just on balance, we feel that there's enough protection there to ensure that the benefits of this project will persist for 15 years as required, without requiring the landowner to go through that step, which in this case would have prevented the project from moving forward. The applicant would have just withdrawn their application. So it's accepting a little bit of risk in exchange for the conservation value that we're hoping to achieve.
Well, it's sort of, it's a little bit more than a little bit, right? So like if you've owned the land for 100 years, we don't require the deed to be recorded. It is, I understand why we're doing it and that there aren't a lot of options, but I don't think it's insignificant in terms of not recording deeds. Because it also changes potentially other parts of the property tax and other impacts on the state. So I just want to be aware fully of the risk we're taking and what little recourse there is if in fact someone disagrees, if the deed isn't recorded. The state is the one taking the risk, not the landowner in this case.
Sarah, when was the last time we passed a request like this?
Typically, it's my understanding that we haven't brought them to the board. So one example of where we have waived the landowner access agreements being recorded is with CDFW's Nutria requirement, where they have dozens of landowners, and going in there and bringing it all before them, it just wasn't, my understanding, a requirement. But this is the first time where we've gone into a project knowing that this was a concern of the landowner.
And did we have legal review, or is it just?
Yes. Nicole, if
I
you're...
really do want to support it. I don't want to support it with the board not understanding
Yes.
that there is a risk. It's just an important part, right? Like that, if the board is there to support it, which I'm supportive of, I just would have loved a more thorough legal analysis of kind of the risk, not only to the board, but to the state. And this is Nicole Ricky, your attorney. So I did weigh in with staff on this, and I think we do generally require the recording. From my perspective, it's primarily to ensure notice to subsequent landowners in the event of a sale of the property during the time window of the grant agreement. In this situation, where the property has been under, one ownership for such an extended period of time, and the likelihood of a sale seems is very slim. I think there is, there's less risk, obviously, to the state and to the Conservancy for there being a transfer of land and there not being adequate notice to a future owner. In terms of tax impacts, that's not something I have looked at. So that is a separate issue that is kind of beyond my expertise as a land use attorney. So I haven't considered that.
Do we see this as, Sarah, as you just said, you're finding this with more and more smaller landowners, so this is almost precedent setting for the board, at the board level here today?
I think we could be running into this scenario again in the future as we continue to work with different landowners.
So just to share from the perspective of somebody who's in agriculture, and I don't know if anybody else in here is a grower or has been, but as you put more these types of easements on your property, it affects the type of crops that you can, or it can potentially affect the type of crops that you can plant. And if you were going to put orchards in the future, but you're going to want to plant those where we got an easement that runs through the property, well, you can't really plant there because at some point somebody's going to want to drive a truck through that. And those trees will be there for 20 years. And so those types of considerations for some of these small landowners are significant because it affects their livelihood moving forward. So the requirement to place these deeded easements on those properties can have direct effects on whether they're going to participate in our programs or not. And as was said, I think that we're going to see that more and more moving into the future, especially as we start to see some of these smaller farms or some of these bigger farms carved up into smaller pieces. Not that that's going to happen on this particular piece. I know this family, but in the future for the Conservancy, it'll make a difference.
One question.
So are we then saying that the length of time and knowing the family, I understand what you're saying, and again, I support it. It's the analysis I'm having a hard time with, because knowing a family and the length of time you've owned it shouldn't necessarily be the precedent setting. I mean, that's in some of the ways in which we're talking about it that are actually concerning.
This is Don Toll. I have a question for Nicole. Nicole, is there a way to, I think maybe to thread the needle a little bit on this, and that what I've heard from staff, that the term of the agreement will be for 15 years, it's not in perpetuity, and I think to the points being made here relative to concerns about instruments that are filed against the land that run with not just with the deed, but basically it's a transfer of property right for obviously to receive funding for the improvements or whatever is embodied in the agreement. But is there a way to, at least for the 15 years, the term of the, again, obviously this situation where you have a family that in all likelihood would not, change ownership, but it could happen over the course of at least a 15-year period. Is there a way to not so much file against a deed, but to have a instrument, because it's on file here with the Conservancy, but if there was going to be a land transfer, or there was going to be a consideration by a local jurisdiction, a county or a city to divide land, at least know that there was an agreement in place for whatever the remaining term is. The 15 years starts counting obviously when the agreements are signed, and if it's for longer terms that are agreed to, so be it. I guess my question to you, Nicole, is there and again, I know there are prohibitions and certain requirements as it relates to what documents can be filed with recorders, but more than just having it on file with the Conservancy's, documentation where it's probably retrievable or certainly disclosable, but make it a document that would be, if people were doing a title search, it doesn't affect the land because it's not recorded against the land, but would be available so folks would know that funding was received at, in year 2022, there's an agreement that runs for 15 years, previous landowners, and I assume it would be disclosed in a real estate transaction, but I think as a safeguard, to the point that, Gail Miller is making, that at least, is acknowledged by all parties. This is a term, could go for longer, it's not recorded against the land, so it doesn't, I think, become a hindrance to, the transaction that's important. So I guess, Nicole, long way to ask a question, but is there an instrument that would at least provide a little broader notice to folks, but not be so intrusive that folks would, out of hand? I'm not an attorney, so again, I don't know what parameters might be there, but that's my reason for asking you the question, is something that might put a little more notice effect behind it, but certainly not put upon the property right on the land. So.
Yeah, when we looked at this in detail in the past, and I think that other than recording the grant agreement, there's not much that you can record on the title that would serve that purpose on. What we do have is the landowner access agreement, essentially a contract, and it's settled and it's enforceable. And so that agreement requires the property owner to do certain things in compliance with the grant agreement for the 15-year term. It's been a while since I've actually looked at the landowner access agreement, but we could go back and ensure that there's a clear term within that agreement that requires the property owner to provide affirmative notice to any buyers, if there are any buyers during the term of the grant agreement, and to also perhaps require notice to the Delta Conservancy if there's any potential sale of the property, so that the Delta Conservancy can affirmatively notice the potential buyer of the grant agreement and the remaining term of it. So we could perhaps bolster the landowner access agreement to make sure that the notification requirements are clear within that. But that, again, wouldn't necessarily appear on a title search.
Okay.
But I think that is something we could do. And again, it may already be in there. It's just been a while since I've looked at it, but we could take a look at that and make sure it's as robust as possible.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable, at least in my view. And again, it just, I think it puts all parties on fair notice for, dollars that are received and work is performed and for the public interest for that period of time in which it's valid. So anyway, that's all I have.
Don, perhaps your idea reminded me of the NRC agreement that they have.
Right.
I would think to some extent that's binding. Perhaps that's something we can model that after.
Could be a good point. Brian has hand up. Brian.
Oh, Brian, yes, sir.
And it's also an instrument, the memorandum of unrecorded grant agreement that can be used.
Oh, okay.
That we've used before in other grant programs. That I think it's something we should look into along with this, just so that it's there on the title, like you were just saying, but it's not recorded, so that people know that there's an agreement between the landowner and the state of California to keep this up for 15 years.
And it doesn't cloud the title in any way.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
We've been using it since 2002. So.
And the landowners, from the purposes that I was speaking of earlier of their business, their ag business, they will understand that lease agreement, because they lease their lands for agricultural uses, and if they sell the property, that lease carries over, just like it would if someone would lease an apartment. So they will understand that, and I'm sure that would be acceptable to them. Yes, ma'am.
So, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we look into that and have, was there some discussion with them regarding that or no?
I don't recall. I know this was right when the applicant was applying for it, and we had to go into our discussion, or like, I don't say lockdown, but no discussions about that.
Yeah.
So this one was our option here about was it the notice of unrecorded grant agreement as well? So.
Yeah, I thought during the concept proposal phase that there was discussion of that, and they seemed uninterested in that, but I could be wrong, because granted, I've been transitioning now. And then small point of clarification is talking about the grant term. It's 15 years after the funding term, so it's likely a total of approximately 18 years if we're writing a 3-year grant agreement. So that's not likely to make any difference, but for full transparency.
Is the applicant on the line?
Applicant's right behind you. Anything you can add?
This is Catherine from Solano RCD.
Hi. Thank you for considering this.
Can we have you come to the table so your voice picks up on the microphone for folks? Anywhere is fine.
Thank you for considering this. I've worked for Solano RCD for 15 years. We've worked with a lot of private landowners, and I think that when you are a small private agricultural landowner, this is a real problem. Your family's wealth and your business is completely tied up in the land. And so this was a big concern. So I appreciate you being willing to consider this and be flexible on this. I think if the Delta Conservancy wants to work with private landowners, you will find that this is an ongoing problem, particularly with family-owned, smaller agricultural operations. So I don't know if there was specific questions I can answer. I think that the landowner, as I understand it in my conversations with the family, is that anything recorded on the title of the deed would be problematic and would probably cause us to have to seek a different source of funding that did not require that. They have signed an NRCS contract, which has a 15-year tenure. It's not just for access, it's for survival of the trees and shrubs. So the NRCS funding is matched to the Delta Conservancy funding. Both pots of money are being used to plant the 1,800 trees and shrubs, the 20,000 forbs, and do all the arundo control. And by signing the NRCS agreement contract, the landowner is agreeing to allow NRCS staff to access the site, and they are guaranteeing that the trees and shrubs are there 15 years after installation and maintained correctly.
Any other questions, anybody?
I guess I have a question for Sarah. Are there other conservancies having this issue also when they're making grant agreements with smaller landowners, and is there something we can take a look at or model even our own future policy over?
Yeah, so when we were doing our research last summer and fall on this topic, we reached out to other conservancies, and they're recording the grant agreement against the deed is very variable across different state agencies or departments that we've run into. Everything that's pretty vague or open versus other ones being pretty conservative or strict. So it's highly variable from our research.
I think our policy would remain that it's a priority. In all cases, it should be with rare exceptions. And again, I think on the balance here, we think that this is an exception that we're recommending.
Sir?
Do you know if the landowners should be amenable to what we've been discussing? Not a recording against the deed, but something else?
A memo of unrecorded grant agreement.
I don't know if it was something that went on the deed. I don't think so. They indicated a willingness to sign a contract, which would be enforceable, but I believe their position is they do not want something appended to the deed.
Well,
and we did some research on it. It's hard to unappend something. In fact, it pretty much never happens.
Yeah.
So the problem, I think, is that it's not just the 15 years. it's on there permanently.
Brian, maybe just to clarify, a memorandum of unrecorded grant agreement is just that. It's an agreement between the state and the landowner that is unrecorded.
Correct.
So it's
Oh.
actually very similar then to our land access agreement, which I think Nicole just mentioned is actually enforceable as for the term of the expectation. So both would be.
That's what I was referring to.
I guess I don't fully understand how that works, and it's hard for me to, I'm speaking for the landowner. Which I shouldn't be. Anyway, I would imagine if it's not recorded on the deed, and he had said he'd be willing to sign a contract, that would be acceptable. But
And Kathleen,
And this is Nicole again. We did look into, and this is now years ago when we were first starting up the Prop 1 program. I do recall doing research into the option of the memorandum of unrecorded grant agreement, and I know that I can't recall exactly the specifics of it, but we didn't choose that as our sort of plan A because it wasn't as desirable as recording the actual grant agreement. So I think there were some downsides to it, and we decided that our best bet was to have it recorded and to then also have a landowner access agreement. And in this situation, I'd be reluctant to go with the path of the unrecorded grant, the notice of unrecorded grant agreement without going back over that research and deciding how much benefit that offered above the landowner access agreement. I think the landowner access agreement, like I said, is an enforceable contract, and so I feel like that's pretty good as compared to the notice of unrecorded grant agreement. Is my recollection.
We're talking about the Emmys, right?
yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I got the right family. Ulatis Creek runs all the way through my district, and I know the family, like I said before. And so I totally understand why this ain't going on a deed.
Yeah, it's not.
And so this is an old school cattle guy, right? Yeah. So anyway, I agree. I think that the contract is probably the best avenue with the family, and if it's binding, and just like a lease, when somebody's leasing the property to raise almonds on it or whatever it might be, it's enforceable. So I think the vulnerability of the state, there is some, but this is California, everything can be litigated. So I think that the Conservancy has a level of safety with regard to approval of this contract without recording it on the deed. Sir?
Enforceable and transferable.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's
Those
the
are the two
other
things we need.
aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a suggestion. I'd like to move forward with this and approve it. I think it's a good project. I don't know the family. I want to recognize the risk to the state and particularly to the Conservancy. My suggestion is that we preliminarily approve the project pending additional research by Nicole and discussions with the family to make sure that they're comfortable with the contract process. And if they are, and if Nicole's research suggests that this is all proper to move forward, then I suggest that since we have preliminarily approved this, that Campbell, the executive director, with the chair, are able to sign the agreement and move forward. I don't know if that's something that works or not, but it precludes having to wait for the next board meeting to come in again.
Would work for me if it would work for Campbell and the lawyer.
I'm uncomfortable voting for this today until I see a more complete legal analysis and the options. Particularly, I don't know if the contract includes, if we go the contract route, a requirement that they notify purchasers and that the Conservancy be notified of a pending sale. I'm concerned about the presidential effect as well. Because I know you know the landowners, but I don't, and I don't know future landowners. And I'm willing to go forward, but I want to see a full legal analysis and make sure that we do it in a way that's most protective of the interests of the state and the Conservancy.
And Mr. Chair, I agree with that, and I actually am really happy to find ways that don't require recording the deed. I don't have a problem with that in and of itself. It's just what the contract looks like, so that if there is a sale or God forbid somebody passes away or there's something that happens on the property, that it's just, that it's commensurate. I do think what Mr. Cash is suggesting is probably a fine way to get that. So I have a huge amount of gratitude to this landowner for being willing to do this. I think the project makes a lot of sense. I really do think we can get there. I just think there's one additional step, just to make sure that when these things come to the Conservancy, that we have all of the information, because by the Conservancy's vote, the state is agreeing to it, and I think what the state needs to see is just the analysis to make sure that we're all, that we're protecting the state, we're protecting landowners as Mr. Professor says, future buyers. And so I just think there's one additional small step that needs to be taken, but in no means am I suggesting that we actually record the deed. I understand the concern about that and hope that we can move forward with more flexibility so that we do get more access to some of these lands. I completely agree with that.
Another suggestion, if timing is an issue, I'm not sure that it is, and maybe staff can speak to that. If there's an issue with deferring this until the next board meeting, I'd be happy if staff wants to email me the landowner access agreement template that we're utilizing, and also the draft grant agreement, then I can we can continue this item until later in the meeting, and I could take a look and we could come back and I could speak more clearly to what's required in the landowner access agreement, if that's helpful.
That's very similar to what I was going to suggest. Typically, we do the landowner access agreement in the process of executing the grant, but we could certainly bring that back to the board at the October meeting to give the board comfort that that agreement is sufficient to protect the state's interests. I guess the question to the RCD is how would that be problematic in terms of a time?
I think we can definitely work with that. I just want to extend my sincere gratitude that you're willing to consider this. The vast majority of lands that we want to work on are privately owned, and finding a way to work with private landowners is critical. So thank you, and we'll be willing to wait for this procedure to be established. And I personally hope that many other private landowners use the procedure that you've established to work with the Delta Conservancy in the future.
Could I just offer a comment? It seems to me that maybe before the conclusion of the meeting, what was said here, Nicole can take a look at the contract right now, that if it's enforceable, it's going to be enforceable. I mean, just, what method you have to enforce with. I think just the notice and transferability seem to, and again, maybe that's already embedded in all of this. And because again, I hate to see us hold it up. I'm not uncomfortable with what Leo suggested. I get it if people want to know for certain. I think we all do with some level of certainty. But it seems to me that staff was already bringing a recommendation to go forward. We've had a good discussion today, Mr. Chair. I would just suggest maybe before we can conclude this item, if Nicole can take a look at it, or we can, again, the contract comes from, we present the contract with the funding, and so if we insert another sentence in language, then it becomes a part of our standard contract, another sentence or whatever it is, clarifies it. Then that's the contract that's presented to them, and it doesn't make recorded against the land necessarily, but I think accomplishes what we're all trying to get to here and protects the interest of the state, but also the parties that we're working with to see that the work is done. So I would just offer that. So would you suggest, Campbell, that you do before the end of the meeting? Is that what you're
Well, I think that would be great. I guess I just want to hear from Supervisor Provenza if that would be acceptable from your perspective.
Yeah, I would like to see that, just for my own due diligence, to make sure all those issues are covered in the notice and so forth before I vote on it.
I guess
whether
for
that's
me,
later in
Mr. Chair,
the
right. I would even mind, Mr. Chair, calling a special meeting if we needed to, because with Sunday service, you can do that. I don't necessarily understand why we have to do it today, because I won't be comfortable until we sort of at least analyze Mr. Cash's suggestion. If we've used that in the past, I would just want to make sure we fully understand that as well. So I wouldn't have time to review any due diligence between now and the end of the meeting. So I would suggest, with absolutely no prejudice whatsoever, just waiting, as little as 10 days if it's important to get it done quickly. Or you could actually even continue this meeting, but I'm not sure I understand the urgency to review the documentation today, unless the landowner wouldn't be willing to just have a moment's pause.
I agree with that, really. I think that's a good suggestion, because really we're here to set policy and what we do will have precedential effect. So whatever we do should be done in the best possible way, so that in the future we're offering the same to others in a way that's, again, most protective of the state, the Conservancy, future purchasers, etc.
Okay.
I think that this is Mitch, for those of you that are online can't see, but you can hear us. I think that it would be, at this point with the discussion, good to table this until October and give everybody a chance to look at it and make sure, because as we said, we're setting policy, and that there's going to be the potential that we're going to be using this into the future, especially if we want to work with private landowners, which we're going to have to do in the Delta, right? I mean, that's just going to happen. The state doesn't own it all. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to make it work. I guess I would move that we table this until this particular portion, 3 of 6, until October, if that's okay with the RCD.
Sure.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay.
We don't need a motion for that. It would just
Okay.
table the agenda.
Yep. Next.
Okay, so with that one, we will go ahead and move to the next project ID 2209, which is the Sacramento Marsh Habitat Hydrological Resiliency. Go ahead, Trevor.
Thank you. The next proposal I'll be presenting is Project ID 2209, which is improving the hydrological resiliency of managed wetlands in the Sassoon Marsh. This is an implementation project located in Solano County and is proposed by the Sassoon Resource Conservation District. This item can be found on page 54 of your agenda packet, and the Conservancy staff recommends that the board approve up to $542,546 in grant funding for this proposal. The proposed project will improve habitat conditions in the Sassoon Marsh for plants and wildlife, along with improving the water quality by installing new hydrological infrastructure at 4 project sites in the marsh area. These improvements will benefit over 3,000 acres of managed wetlands, and these are sites that were previously identified in a Conservancy planning project titled the Sassoon Marsh Improvement Assessment. That particular project identified key habitat restoration targets in the Sassoon Marsh. The improvement efforts will directly benefit ecosystem function, improve water quality, and reduce mosquito production, increasing public health and safety, and increase export of fish food resources. The total cost share amount for this project is 14%, with the applicant leveraging state funds and providing in-kind services, and the landowners providing cash. This project is consistent with the specific actions and priorities identified in Proposition 1, California Water Action Plan, Conservancy's governing statute, and the Conservancy's strategic plan. The proposal demonstrates local support, including a resolution from the project's County Board of Supervisors. The applicants have provided letters of commitment from the 4 landowners of support from various stakeholders outlined in the staff recommendation. There are no additional considerations. At this time, I'd like to hand you off to Rachel, who will brief you on the environmental compliance considerations.
Hi, good morning again, board members. The Improving Hydrological Resiliency of Managed Wetlands in Sassoon Marsh is a project under CEQA and presents a slightly different CEQA scenario than the previous projects the board has considered so far today. I really appreciate your attention as I explain this one because it is a little bit more complex. So just to step back briefly, the Sassoon Marsh Habitat Management, Preservation, and Restoration Plan, or the Sassoon Marsh Plan, was developed by a group of federal, state, and local agencies in order to balance the benefits of tidal wetland restoration and with other habitat benefits of the Sassoon Marsh, such as managed wetland enhancement. The project before you for consideration today would implement many actions which were outlined in the Sassoon Marsh Plan. Back in 2011, an environmental impact report was prepared for the Sassoon Marsh Plan through collaboration among the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, who is the CEQA lead agency in this case, and other agencies with primary responsibility for management in the Sassoon Marsh. The environmental impact report for the Sassoon Marsh Plan found that it would impact air quality, noise, utility and public services, cultural resources, and public health and environmental hazards. Most impacts from the implementation of the plan could be mitigated to less than significant levels, and CDFW detailed this mitigation in a mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program. However, the final environmental impact report also found approval of the Sassoon Marsh Plan would result in the occurrence of significant effects to cultural resources that could not be mitigated. CDFW approved the Sassoon Marsh Plan upon adopting a statement of overriding considerations that the Sassoon Marsh Plan would provide social, biological, and flood control benefits that override the significant and unavoidable impacts to cultural resources. Thus, CDFW fulfilled the requirements of CEQA and approved the Sassoon Marsh Plan by filing a notice of determination, making findings of fact, and adopting a statement of overriding consideration. Conservancy staff have reviewed all of these documents and findings and find that almost all of the activities proposed by the applicant conform with the Sassoon Marsh Plan and other relevant environmental policies. The exception to this being the removal of a tree at one site, which may be inconsistent with either the Sassoon Marsh Plan or the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission's Sassoon Marsh Protection Plan. Staff plan to work with the applicant to better understand the context of this tree removal and will not include in a potential grant agreement funding for a tree removal that is not compliant with relevant environmental policies. So, as a funder of...
So it's just one tree?
So that is my understanding based on the proposal.
It's a big tree?
So this happened, so as Sarah mentioned previously, once we get the proposals after a certain stage, we can't ask any questions. So, so essentially, just to briefly expand, since you asked, in the Sassoon Marsh Protection Plan, BCBC's policy, some policies about eucalyptus trees because they're roosting habitat for herons. So just understanding where the tree is and what the deal is about it will be our next step. So as a funder for actions that implement the Sassoon Marsh Plan, the Delta Conservancy is a responsible agency under CEQA and is required to make independent findings, which are represented by the resolution and notice of determination, which can be found on pages 59 and 61 of the board packet, respectively. Staff recommends the board make responsible agency findings, which concur with CDFW's statement of overriding consideration, and conclude that all possible mitigation measures have been included in the project to eliminate significant effects on the environment. If the board adopts the resolution, the board chair will sign the resolution and the notice of determination, and staff will post to the State Clearinghouse, Solano County, and on the Delta Conservancy's website.
Thank you, Rachel. So in summary, we are pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there is suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item for your consideration. But before we proceed, we'd like to take any questions or comments that you have.
Any questions from the board or the public? Anybody on the phone who would like to comment? Oh, sure.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of folks in the mix in the Sassoon Marsh. Are all the other entities that work in there, are they all supportive of this project? They're on board?
Steve, are you still on the line?
No, we should have mentioned, Steve actually recused himself just because they are the applicants. So he dropped off the line to not be on.
Hopefully he would be there to answer that because he worked regularly with all of them.
I think the answer is yes. The planning analysis that we did worked with all the landowners. There's just general recognition from all the landowners that these are the type of activities they need to do.
Okay.
And they're,
good.
All right. Anybody else online with a question or a comment? No? You look like you're ready to ask a question, sir. No? Okay. That said, then I'd like to make a motion, but you want to read the language? Sir, go ahead.
This is Jim Provenza. I'm sorry. What are the cultural resources, and is there an interested party in those cultural resources?
So I will pull up really quickly. So I think some of the concern.
it's a very large document. Rachel's scanning to find the chunk that's relevant.
So just making sure I come to the right place. Great. So here we go. So restoration impacts on cultural resources. There were two main identified, both of which could have potentially, one of which has significant and unavoidable impacts, and the other of which can be reduced to less than significant with mitigation measures. So the first impact that was recorded is damage to Montezuma Slough rural historic landscape and Means Landing as a result of ground disturbing activities along Montezuma Slough. So that's a pretty specific impact to a particular area. I don't have the map of the specific sites in front of me, though if the applicant is on the line, perhaps they can share if any of those are along Montezuma Slough. And then the other impact was damage to or destruction of other known or unknown there we go. My PDF is being pretty bizarre. Damage to or destruction to other known cultural resources or as a result of ground disturbing activities in the lowlands of the marsh. So this has to do with potentially finding things during construction. And just because there's been so much human activity on the marsh from the time of the indigenous peoples of California all the way through the long history of duck clubs and private landowners who have been managing these managed wetlands. So that is one of the impacts that could be mitigated. And then the third impact listed, damage to known cultural resources as a result of inundation. So this would be if areas are flooded, either for increased flooding for managed wetlands or potentially in areas that are being restored to tidal wetlands, which is not the case for this project. And then the final two, inadvertent damage or destruction of as of yet unidentified cultural resources from ground disturbing activities, so the same types of things, but from ground movement as opposed to flooding. And then finally, damage or destruction of human remains as a result of ground disturbing activities, which would be mitigated to less than significant levels because there are a whole lot of processes, best management practices that go into effect as soon as you were to locate any sort of human remains. So just to briefly summarize, because I think I was a little bit disjointed as a result of my PDF being a little weird, there are restoration impacts, which I just described, and then there are managed wetland activity impacts, which are damage to or destruction of shipwrecks or other submerged resources as a result of channel dredging, which is specific to dredging of channels, which the applicant can speak to. Damage to or destruction of known cultural resources resulting from managed wetland activities. And then finally, damage to or destruction of a yet as unknown cultural resource. So again, things that we might find during managed wetland activities. And of those managed wetland activity impacts, only one was significant and unavoidable. And that is the damage to potentially unknown cultural resources. So those would be resources that would be found during construction and during these improvements. So to summarize all that information, because I know it is kind of a lot, there are 8 total impacts to cultural resources that were detailed in this environmental impact report. 3 of which applied to managed wetland activities, which is what is in the proposal that you're looking at today. And of those 3 impacts, only 1 was the significant and unavoidable, and that is for things that basically we yet don't know what they are. So I would turn it back over to you really quickly and see if I successfully answered your question, if you want any clarification around those points.
Well, in terms of the significant and unavoidable, and I know some of that is unknown, has someone consulted with indigenous peoples or others that may be interested to get their viewpoint on it?
So during the development of the final environmental impact report that is done through CEQA, there is a public noticing process. So you have to notice when you are preparing the environmental impact report, and then when it is drafted, and then again when it is final. So as far as general public ability to comment on this, that occurred through the CEQA process. As far as who specifically was reached, were the outreach components of that back in when this document was written, which again was in 2011. I would have to do a little bit more research. I feel not super confident in my ability to find that on the fly, but I can look through it really quickly as we continue our discussion.
Well, and then our notification process does notify tribal interest for this specific project as well. So, and we've heard no reply.
Thank you, Campbell. That's a good point.
You had no reply from the tribal interest? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think I'm okay. Thank you.
You're okay, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so would you like to read the language of the recommended?
I would, thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
For this first motion, move to adopt resolution 2022-02, which makes responsible agency findings that improving hydrological resiliency of managed wetlands in the Sassoon Marsh implements the Sassoon Marsh Plan, and that all necessary mitigation measures have been included.
So moved.
Second.
And a second. Thank you, Doc.
Okay, I have a move by Mashburn, second by Sandoval. Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Miller?
Aye.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Winternet?
Yes.
And Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Aye. We have 8 ayes, the motion carries.
For the next motion, the language is as such. Move to award funding up to $542,546 to the Sassoon Resource Conservation District for improving hydrological resiliency of managed wetlands in Sassoon Marsh, conditional upon the items noted in the staff recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, Bob.
Oh, wait, Leo got it? Leo got it. I heard Leo
got
say it.
that.
That was Leo.
I got Leo. Okay, I have Mashburn as a motion and Winternitz as a second. Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Board Member Winternitz?
Yes.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Miller? Gail?
Aye.
Aye. Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
We have 8 ayes, the motion carries.
At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to say a few words if they're on the line.
I don't think Steve's. I thought John was going to join.
Yeah.
This is John Takakawa, and I'm joining. I would like to just say thank you to the board and to the Delta Conservancy for letting me come back again for a second try at this, which getting a score of 93 out of 100 makes me feel a little better that we properly presented the information for a project that I think is very important and very good for improving hydrologic infrastructure for several acres of wetlands within Sassoon Marsh. We're hopeful that this type of approach of improving resiliency will prepare us for the future of increasing salinities, even as we see them this year, as well as for sea level rise as we're looking for in the future by having the proper infrastructure in place. We'd like to thank the involved landowners who have agreed to work with us on this, and also the agencies, Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Central Valley Joint Venture for endorsing the agreement, and the Association of RCP for their endorsement letter. I want to comment on that. In general, I think it's an excellent project to move forward. We're going to learn a lot about how well we can try to manage our hydrology and how well we can see that moving toward the future, we have better options for addressing things like these high salinity spikes and drought conditions and still be able to keep our wetlands healthy and vigorous. So I thank you again very much for your action, and we're looking forward to undertaking the project.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you.
Unless there's any more comment on that item, or on to the next one. We're getting that much closer.
Let me go ahead and hand it off to Sarah for the next item here.
Okay. So the next proposal for consideration of award is Project ID 2211, titled Marsh Creek Reservoir Restoration and Total Mercury Reduction Planning Project. This planning project is located in Contra Costa County and is proposed by the Contra Costa County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. This project, or this item, can be found on page 63 of your agenda packet. Conservancy staff recommend that the board approve up to $350,000 in grant funding for this proposal, conditional upon the approval of findings for a project site located outside of the legal delta. The purpose of this project is to prepare and restore reservoir capacity, ecosystem functions, habitat resiliency to climate change, and reduce mercury output to downstream delta habitats. The planning project would take preliminary design plans from their concept proposal stage to 100% completion, conduct community engagement, complete environmental compliance and permitting, and prepare a long-term management plan for the site. The Marsh Creek Dam and Reservoir is located 1/2 mile, so 0.5 miles, from the legal delta in the city of Brentwood. The project site is hydrologically connected to the delta via Marsh Creek. Over the last 60 years, ecosystem function of the reservoir has been diminished because of sediment accumulation at the site. Additionally, the water and sediment entering the reservoir are contaminated with mercury originating from an upstream abandoned mercury mine at the base of Mount Diablo. The proposed improvements to Marsh Creek Reservoir would result in a multi-benefit implementation project that would increase reservoir capacity to, amongst other benefits, reduce total output of mercury-laden water and sediment that is carried downstream into the delta, properly remove the mercury-laden sediment, restore up to 18 acres of riparian and 3 areas of wetland habitats, install cattle exclusion fencing, and conduct public outreach. This, for environmental compliance, this project is not considered a project under CEQA because it is a planning project. And I also want to note that all future CEQA would be completed by the applicant on here. For cost share, the total cost share for this project is 42% of the project budget. The applicant will provide in-kind services through staff time to perform the tasks outlined in the proposal. This project, as with the other ones we've presented today, is consistent with Proposition 1, the California Water Action Plan, the Conservancy's governing statute, and the Conservancy's 2022 and 2027 strategic plan. The applicant has provided a resolution of support from the project's County Board of Supervisors, and additionally, the applicant has provided letters of support from various stakeholders outlined in the staff recommendation. So for additional considerations, this one is for a planning project that would, this project is for planning for a future implementation of a project that is located outside of the legal delta. As I mentioned last month when we brought this up, the Conservancy's enabling, or not last month, in May, the Conservancy's enabling legislation requires that the board make certain findings if it approves funding for activities outside of the delta. Staff recommends that the board find that an implementation project resulting from the planning will meet the 5 requirements described in the staff recommendation on page 65 of the board packet. To highlight, the project implements the goals, the ecosystem goals of the Delta Plan, is consistent with state and federal permits. The Conservancy has given notice to affected local jurisdictions and addressed comments and has given notice to the State Coastal Conservancy, and that the project will provide significant benefits to the Delta. So, in summary, we are pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there is suggested motion language at the bottom of this agenda item for your consideration. Any questions at this time?
Not seeing any here, any online? Any public comment? Seeing none. Could you cover the language?
Chair Mashburn, may I?
Oh, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Supervisor Mitchell, for Supervisor Mashburn, I'd like to move the item.
Great.
All right, would you like to read the language real quick?
Sure, so we have 2 separate motions for this item. The first one is move that the board approve findings for a project site located outside the legal delta for the Marsh Creek Reservoir Restoration and Total Mercury Reduction Planning Project with Contra Costa County Flood Control and Water Conservation District.
All right, so I have a motion.
Second.
And a second by Supervisor Sandoval.
Okay.
I'm getting there. Don't want to get it wrong. Okay, Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
Board Member Winternitz.
Yes.
Board Member Cash.
Aye.
Board Member Miller.
Aye.
Aye. Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Chair Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, the motion carries.
Okay, and then we have the second motion is move to award funding up to $350,000 to the Contra Costa County Flood Control and Water Conservation District for the Proposition 1 grant program, or from the Proposition 1 grant program for the Marsh Creek Reservoir Restoration Total Mercury Reduction Planning Project.
I'll move it.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so we have moved by Sandoval, second by Mashburn. Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Chair Mitchell? I'm sorry, Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Miller? Gail?
Aye.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz?
Yes.
And Board Member Sandoval.
Yes.
That's 8 ayes, the motion carries.
Great. So at this time, we're done with that agenda item. Is the applicant on the line, and would they like to say anything real quick?
Yes, hi, I am. My name is Conservancy. I am the Sacramento-San County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. I'm very excited to see this project move forward with this Conservancy grant. Thank you, the board members and the staff. We look forward to working with you on this project. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up.
All right.
All right, so the last one for our Proposition 1 Cycle 5. Trevor, will you go ahead and take over for that one?
Thank you, Sarah. The last Prop 1 proposal for today's meeting is Project ID 2212. This is titled the Van Buskirk Multi-Benefit Ecosystem Restoration Planning Project. This planning project is located in San Joaquin County and is proposed by American Rivers. This item can be found on page 67 of your agenda packet. And the Conservancy staff would like to recommend that the board approve up to $467,848 in grant funding for this proposal. The proposed project will create a multi-benefit ecosystem restoration project on the former 192-acre Van Buskirk golf course located along the San Joaquin River in Stockton, California. The proposed project will facilitate agency coordination and community engagement in order to generate restoration design plans and create nature-based design solutions, along with multi-benefit flood protection solutions. The project will also serve to procure funding for the implementation phase. As of now, the efforts by the Army Corps of Engineers to fortify the levees and the City of Stockton's efforts to turn the area behind the levee into a park are not connected. This planning effort would facilitate the coordination of those projects and allowing the community to benefit from a reduced flood risk from the levee failure, create public access and recreational opportunities along Delta waterways, and connect the San Joaquin River and sloughs to natural floodplains and riparian habitat. All of these efforts would directly benefit a socially vulnerable and historically disadvantaged community along the San Joaquin River. This planning project is not a project considered under CEQA, and all future CEQA procedures would be completed by the applicant. The applicant proposes to complete the CEQA process and secure necessary permits for implementation as part of this project. It is expected that Contra Costa County would serve as the lead agency to prepare the initial study mitigated negative declaration for the implementation phase. The total cost share amount for this project is 1% of the budget, with the applicant providing cash. The planning project before you today is part of a multi-agency $1 billion project funded by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency, and the California Department of Water Resources. This project is consistent with the specific actions and priorities identified in Proposition 1, the California Action Plan, Water Action Plan, and the Conservancy's governing statute and the Strategic Action Plan. The applicant has received letters of support from the stakeholders outlined in the staff recommendation. The applicant has made efforts to involve the public and keep them notified and engage with the project planning efforts. There is some additional consideration. The applicant has worked with the landowner and has a tentative agreement that they will support the planning project The Conservancy staff will ensure that there is landowner support prior to executing this agreement. So in summary, we are pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there is suggested motion language at the bottom of this agenda item for your consideration. Before we proceed, I'm happy to take any comments or questions.
Any questions from anybody here at the meeting or anybody online? Or public comment? Seeing none.
All right, at this time, I'll suggest motion language. Move to award funding up to $467,848 to American Rivers from Proposition 1 grant program for the Van Buskirk Multi-Benefit Ecosystem Restoration Project, conditional upon the items noted in the additional consideration section of the staff recommendation.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I got a second. I got it. I got it.
You got it, okay. Okay, you got it, Chair.
Okay. Okay, Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza? Jim?
Aye. Sorry.
It's okay.
Board Member Gail Miller?
Aye.
Board Member
Aye.
Cash?
Board Member Winternitz?
Aye.
And Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
That's 8 ayes, the motion carries.
At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to say a few words if they're on the line.
Good morning. This is Kristen Colbert from American Rivers. On behalf of American Rivers and City of Stockton and our key stakeholders who will be involved in the project, I would really like to thank the board and staff for their support of this project. We are very, very excited to have the opportunity to advance planning on this project, which we believe will be a valuable resource to the City of Stockton and in particular the people of South Stockton. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you and thank the staff for all of that. That was a lot of work we're gonna put into that. Man, that was tough. So, I guess we can move on into the next agenda item then.
Yes.
All right.
Great, thank you.
We are on the consideration of award of a climate access and restoration grant fund for Big Break Regional Shoreline Restoration and Public Access Planning Project. Go.
Great. So thank you all again. So we're shifting away from now the Proposition 1 Cycle 5 funding to recommendations for another funding source that the Conservancy have, which is our climate resiliency, community access, and natural resource protection activities. So as a reminder, this was a one-time general fund allocation to the Delta Conservancy of approximately $5 million. We got this about last fall. And the first proposal that we're bringing for you today for this funding source is for consideration of board is CAR 03, titled Big Break Regional Shoreline Restoration and Public Access Planning Project. This planning project is located in Contra Costa County and is proposed by the East Bay Regional Park District. This item can be found on page 71 of your board packet. As I mentioned in the Proposition 1 Cycle 5 Summary of Recommendations, which was Agenda Item 9.1, this project was initially submitted as part of the Conservancy's Proposition 1 and Proposition 68 grant programs. After evaluating the proposal through both grant programs, Conservancy staff determined that certain components of the project were ineligible for either Proposition 1 or Proposition 68 grant programs. However, Conservancy staff determined that all elements of the proposed project are ideally suited for our climate access and restoration funding source. Additionally, I want to highlight that the project proposal was reviewed and received consistently high evaluations across reviewers. By funding the project through CAR, the result is a single, cost-effective, comprehensive, and multi-benefit project that will benefit the Delta ecosystem and community. So therefore, Conservancy staff recommend that the board approve up to $390,000 in grant funding for this proposal. As a project summary, the purpose of this planning project is to develop a sea level rise adaptation plan and a vegetation management plan to support the long-term sustainability of 1,648 acres of open water, wetland, and upland habitat. The planning project would, among other activities, conduct flood risk assessment, topographic surveys, vegetation and wetland mapping, cultural resource risk assessments, and create specific and actionable plan for the Big Break Regional Shoreline Park under future climate conditions. The Big Break Regional Shoreline is home to over 70 species of animals and provides public access to the delta with outdoors exhibits, trails, a fishing pier, a kayak launch site, and a designated trailhead for the San Francisco Bay Water Trail. Additionally, Big Break is home to a visitor center that connects the park to the delta via educational and recreational programs. I know several of us have attended meetings at the Big Break Visitor Center as well. It's wonderful. So as a planning project, this is not considered a project under CEQA. Cost share, so the total cost share amount for this project was 32% of the project budget. The applicant will provide in-kind services through staff time to perform the tasks outlined in the staff recommendation. The project is consistent with specific actions and priorities identified in the California Water Action Plan, the Conservancy's governing statute, and the 2022 through 2027 Conservancy Strategic Plan. For local support, the applicant has provided a resolution of support from the project's county board of supervisors. Additionally, the project was deeply rooted in the Big Breaks land use plan, which the applicant developed in collaboration with the community. So in summary, we are pleased to recommend this project for board approval, noting that there is, once again, suggested motion language at the bottom of the agenda item. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Anybody present have a question? Anybody online have a question, or is there any public comment on the item?
Hi, this is Katie Kondak with the Bay Regional Park District. I'm the grants manager. I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity and for this consideration. The project team is very excited to get going on this project.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Any further comment? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Let me read it.
Why don't we read the language?
Great. Move to award up to $390,000 to the East Bay Regional Parks District from the Climate Access and Restoration Grant Program for the Big Break Regional Shoreline Restoration and Public Access Planning Project.
Move approval.
I have a motion, and I have a second.
Okay.
All right.
We have a motion by Board Member Cash and a second by Board Member Winternitz. Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Board Member Winternitz?
Yes.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Miller?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza? Supervisor Provenza?
Yes.
There we go. Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Motion carries with 8 ayes.
I have launched my kayak from there. It's not particularly easy, so this will be a welcome addition.
All right, next up is consideration of the Environmental Quality Act, responsible agency findings, and award of climate access and restoration grant for Bees Lake Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project.
If I could just, one quick comment, out of an abundance of caution or even perceived conflicts, I'm just going to recuse myself from conversation here. My son is employed by one of the firms that is a subcontractor that is not directly involved in the project.
So, it's not going to be me this time. It's going to be Martha presenting this one. So we're very excited for this.
Great, thank you. Good morning. And follow up to the Community Enhancement Grant Program update, I'm very pleased to present the CEQA responsible agency findings in consideration of award of the Climate Access and Restoration Grant for the Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project. This item can be found on pages 75 to 78 of your agenda packet. Conservancy staff recommends that the board approve up to $2,373,800 in grant funding for this proposal, the purpose of which is to remove and control invasive species, reestablish native species, install pond aeration devices, and install floating wetland island to improve water quality and provide waterbird habitat. This proposal represents the implementation phase of the project. Of note, the planning phase of this project was funded through a Delta Conservancy Cycle 3 Proposition 1 grant. Also, as Sarah mentioned, the applicant initially submitted elements of the proposed project under both the Conservancy's Proposition 1 and Proposition 68 grant programs. But to reduce duplicative efforts, the applicant withdrew those grant proposals and submitted a single comprehensive multi-benefit project for CAR funding. As a shovel-ready project with both ecological and public access benefits, Conservancy staff felt that this project was ideally suited for this funding source. Although the City of West Sacramento will not contribute cost share, this project has secured significant commitments of time, labor, and in-kind donations. Additionally, the project enjoys a considerable backing from the community, including the support of a stakeholder advisory group that was formed as part of the Cycle 3 planning grant. The proposal packet also includes a resolution of support from the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, as well as letters of support from the West Sacramento City Council, the West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, and the Yolo Habitat Conservancy. At this point, I'd like to hand this over to Rachel to discuss the CEQA responsible agency findings.
Thanks, Martha. So the Bees Lake Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project is considered a project under CEQA. The City of West Sacramento is the lead agency, and the Delta Conservancy as a funder would be a responsible agency. The City of West Sacramento has prepared an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. The initial study found potential significant project impacts on biological resources, cultural resources, geology and soils, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, transportation, and tribal and cultural resources. However, it also determined that all of the identified impacts could be reduced to less than significant levels with the implementation of mitigation measures which were outlined in the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. As a responsible agency for a project under CEQA, the Delta Conservancy Board is required to make independent findings represented by Resolution 2022-03 and submit a notice of determination, which can be found on pages 79 and 81 of the board packet, respectively. Staff have reviewed the documents and findings which were submitted by the applicant, and staff recommends that the board make responsible agency findings, concluding that all necessary mitigation measures have been included in the project to eliminate significant effects on the environment. If the board adopts the resolution, the board chair will sign the resolution and notice of determination, which staff will post with the State Clearinghouse, Yolo County, and on the Delta Conservancy's website.
Great, thank you so much, Rachel. At this time, I'm happy to take comments or questions.
Anybody present have any comments or questions? Anybody online or on the phone have any comments or questions? Public comment? Hearing none, I would ask if you could read the language for us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to proceed with reading the suggested language, which is, there's two motions, and they're noted at the bottom of page 77 of the agenda packet. The first motion is to move to adopt Resolution 2022-03, which makes CEQA responsible agency findings that all necessary mitigation measures have been included in the Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry.
Took me an
Is that
option
you,
here.
Brian? Okay, I have a motion by Winternitz and a second by Cash. Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
Board Member Winternitz?
Yes.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Gail Miller?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
And Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
The motion carries with 8 ayes.
And
Okay,
there's a
wonderful.
second piece, right?
Yeah, the second,
Right.
the second
The
motion.
more important piece.
Right.
Yeah, the real deal.
The $2 million piece. Yes, the second motion is to move to award funding up to $2,373,800 to the City of West Sacramento from the Climate Access and Restoration CAR grant program for the Bees Lakes Habitat Restoration and Public Access Project.
Moved.
Moved. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Sandoval, a second by Chair Mashburn. Supervisor Natoli?
Aye.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Chair Mashburn?
Aye.
Supervisor Provenza?
Aye.
Board Member Miller? Gail?
I'm sorry, aye.
Board Member Cash?
Aye.
Board Member Winternitz?
Yes.
And Board Member Sandoval?
Yes.
We have 8 ayes, the motion carries.
Great, thank you very much. At this moment, I'd like to invite Paul, I almost gave you a new name, Paul Dirksen from the City of West Sacramento to say a few words.
Good morning.
You can play out with your
Yeah, make sure we capture it.
Good morning. I'm the flood protection planner for the City of West Sacramento. This has been a long haul. We appreciate the support of the board for awarding this project and working with staff. Our group is in their initial planning processes and trying to get out contracts to folks. This will be a multi-year, multidisciplinary effort across cuts across many disciplines. And we're really looking forward to getting started. So again, appreciate your support and appreciate the grant award.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just know this is one of the sites we got to visit, actually pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah.
When I got a chance to go out and see, and I know Paul was there, but I know there was a number of folks that took us on a tour, so it was good.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much. You too. All right.
Yay.
Yeah, we're moving through.
That concludes the giving up. Thank you.
All right, the last is consideration of a restoration and adopt a California Environmental Quality Act statutory exemption for restoration projects. Lead agency determination for riparian restoration at River Garden Farms.
So, sorry, this one's the one we're pulling.
Oh, we're pulling,
Yeah.
sorry.
And just for a little bit of background, basically through working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Wildlife Conservation Board, it was determined that the Wildlife Conservation Board is the more appropriate responsible agency or lead agency for this project. And so we don't have to consider it. This was on the agenda, we pulled it from the May, and we're pulling it now.
All right. Then the next is an action item, but it is important, Delta Fish-Friendly Farming Program update.
So, good morning for, I guess, the final time, board members. Thank you so much for your attention during this final information item, because I know this has been a really long meeting with a lot of information that you've had to digest. So this agenda item provides an update on implementation of the Fish-Friendly Farming Program in the Delta. As a reminder, the Conservancy, supported through a grant from the State Water Resource Control Board, has contracted with the California Land Stewardship Institute to implement the Fish-Friendly Farming Program in the Delta. Currently, just over 10,000 acres of farmland are enrolled in the Delta Fish-Friendly Farming Program. In addition to working with farmers to develop farm plans that incorporate best management practices for improving water quality, $200,000 in construction funds were contracted to the California Land Stewardship Institute for the implementation of water quality improvement projects on enrolled farms. On July 7th, 2022, the Delta Fish-Friendly Farming Technical Advisory Committee, or the TAC, met to provide feedback on initial plans for 2 of these proposed water quality improvement projects, which I'm going to briefly describe to you today. So first is the installation of a recirculation pump, which was identified as a key water quality improvement project on Staten Island, where the Nature Conservancy has enrolled 9,200 acres of farmland into the Delta Fish-Friendly Farming Program. This recirculation pump would move irrigation water from main ditches and reapply it at the top of a series of fields to allow for a second irrigation event. This recirculation system will reduce the volume of irrigation water which is diverted from the McCollum River, reduce flow returns from the operation, and also provide a second opportunity for contaminants to denature or bind to the soils before the water re-enters the system. Second, we have a project at Terapithi 3D Farms, which has enrolled 200 acres of farmland on Roberts Island in the eastern Delta. The project proposed here is the installation of improved irrigation, which was identified as a key water quality improvement project during the development of the farm plan. So the property is currently flood irrigated, and this funding would partially pay for conversion of the site to low-flow sprinklers, which would permanently reduce diversions from the Middle River and also reduce return flows to the operation. So both of these projects were brought before the Fish-Friendly Farming TAC, and the California Land Stewardship Institute is currently working with the farmers and those landowners to incorporate the feedback from the Technical Advisory Committee into the project plans. Once the TAC approves the plans and recommends the projects for funding, Conservancy staff and CLSI will prepare appropriate environmental documentation. So it's anticipated that most of the projects that we're going to be funding with this $200,000 of construction funds will be exempt from CEQA, and that then the staff level will file notices of exemption as required for CEQA for these projects. And staff will continue to update the board as additional projects are proposed and recommended for funding by the fish-friendly farming TAC. So that's a brief overview of what's been going on with the fish-friendly farming in the Delta, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions online or public comment? No? Anybody present have any questions about the fish-friendly project? No? All right. Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
And so next up is the EcoRestore update.
Is Charlotte on the line?
Charlotte on the line?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, Chair Mashburn and board members. Charlotte Biggs, here you are. Wish I could be there in person today. We've had a couple meetings come up, so let's have a brief update today on EcoRestore. It's honestly been a big summer for us at DWR and with our restoration projects. We have celebrated 4 restoration projects and multi-benefit projects that either broke ground this year or were completed. So I'm just going to kind of run through those really quick, and I know I've been giving you guys an update on these for the past several meetings, but now we are past the actual groundbreaking, so it's very exciting. So in mid-June this year, we celebrated the Fremont Lear Big Notch project. Big Notch is a 30,000-acre floodplain habitat restoration and fish passage project in the Neola bypass. And the project will expand floodplain rearing habitat for juvenile salmon and other native fish such as sturgeon to improve access through the bypass. So DWR and the Bureau of Reclamation hosted the groundbreaking, and we celebrated with Yolo County, CDSW, NIST, and other partners. And construction is underway on this project, and work is scheduled to be done by late 2023, so next year. The second project, on the last day of June, we celebrated the groundbreaking of Lookout 2, which is the Delta's largest tidal habitat restoration project to date. It's over 3,000 acres, and it's also a flood improvement project where we're setting back the Yolo Bypass West Levee. It's right across the Liberty Island Ecological Reserve. So DWR hosted an event with our private sector partners, ecosystem investment partners to celebrate. We included Yolo County, Supervisor Mashburn, and the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as the Yosemite Nation Tribe. Some of the highlights of this event were we actually ate lunch in the new footprint of the levee, something we couldn't do today because the work is underway and the levee is already being built. And we also had some flags out at the event to show the height of the new levee, which is going to be over 25 feet high. And I think that made a big impact on people who attended. Because you hear 25 feet and then you see how high that is. It's pretty impressive. We expect Lookout 2 project to be completed with construction by the end of 2024. So that'll be a 2-year construction. And then lastly, just 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the groundbreaking of Bradmore Island and the completion of Arnold Slough, which are 2 adjacent tidal wetland restoration projects in the Sacramento Marsh. And we celebrated with the Sacramento Marsh Resource Conservation District, CDSW, Yosemite Nation, and other partners. And we're really thrilled to have this construction of this project underway. It's been in planning for many years, and these efforts are going to help benefit native fish within the marsh. So again, big year for us, a lot of work underway, and I just wanted to let you guys know that there is a lot of content on our website. We have some videos, articles, and photos all on the DWR website, as well as on our social media. And we've been trying to generate some media coverage. We've gotten some, and I've got a couple more things coming up. So part of our goal at EcoRestore, not just to get these projects underway and built, but to also generate some interest and awareness from Californians that this work is going on in the Delta and how important it is to the overall health of the Delta. So that's my update for today. Please let me know if you have any questions. Happy to elaborate on anything I've mentioned.
Anybody present have any questions? No? Anybody online or public comment on that item? Seeing none. Ma'am, thank you so much for that. We appreciate the presentation. Thank you. And so now we have an update from the Delta Stewardship Council.
I just got an email from Amanda that said she had conflict.
Okay.
It ran over, so she's
All
not
right.
able to attend.
Well, we'll get an update at the next meeting in October. All right, Mr. Vink, sir.
Great. I don't really have much of an update from the Delta Protection Commission. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Conservancy Board. It's been a great affiliation with you all as a liaison advisor for over 9 years. And especially want to thank the Conservancy staff. Campbell's been a great colleague and someone I've really appreciated tremendously over the years and value the work that we've been able to do together. But it really extends to Deborah as well and the entire Conservancy staff. We're just a great professional team. And we've had a great association, and I know that will continue. I'm going to be wrapping up my work next Friday. Bruce Blodgett will be joining you as the new liaison advisor for the Delta Protection Commission the next time you meet. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to work with Karen, even though I've known her for ever and ever. Missed that opportunity, but anyway, really appreciate it, and thank you very much.
All right, good.
Thank you, and thank you for your advocacy for the Delta and for the Bay, and for all you've done for all these years to keep it the way it is. Thank you. Make it better. Thank you.
And on behalf of the Conservancy staff, Eric, same to you. We've so appreciated the partnership and the team effort that I think the two agencies have put together under your leadership and the things we've been able to accomplish. It's been great working with you, and wish you a great retirement, and actually look forward to working with Bruce too.
I echo all of that, but we'll get there.
I have to say, as the board liaison, your cell of items I've had to collect is large. Many years of items, so thank you for all those years.
Great. All right, so next is you, Campbell, you're up.
Delta Conveyance.
Oh, I missed the conveyance. I'm sorry, I apologize. The Delta Conveyance update.
So, Carrie, are you on the line?
I am. Hello. Thank you, members of the board, for having me. This is actually Carrie Buckman and not Jennifer Barbieri. I was supposed to be on vacation this week, but COVID changes things often, so I was able to be here. So I think that we actually have a pretty big update today. So for quite a while, I've been coming to these meetings, and my update has been something like, we're working really hard on the draft EIR. But today, I can share that it was released this morning. So hot off the presses. So we posted the draft EIR to start the public review this morning. It's on a website that we've created specifically for this purpose, and the website is deltaconveyanceproject.com. So we have the draft EIR on the website, as well as a number of resources to try to help people as you work through your review, including a series of videos on sort of EIR basics, like what an EIR is, the contents of the document, how to comment. We have resource videos that work through some specific chapters of the document that have some high level of interest for the public, so it might help people understand what's included in the chapter. And we also have some fact sheets and an explainer document that summarizes the document, but in a little bit of a different way from the executive summary. The executive summary, given that it's part of the EIR and the CEQA requirement, needs to be comprehensive and address the entire document. The explainer document is higher level, trying to really be a little bit more friendly to members of the public, but it's not attempting to be comprehensive. It's really just hitting some of the highlights. So the public comment period is through October 27th, and we've scheduled 3 public meetings to hear comments. Those meetings are in September, on September 13th from 9 to 11, September 22nd from 12 to 2, and September 28th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And that information is also on our website, and we'll post the Zoom links as we get closer to the meeting. They are all virtual because we do expect a pretty high degree of interest, and we do not want to risk public health for this purpose. So we are focusing on online only. So I think that's the big update today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from any present? Sir?
Carrie, this is Eric Vink, and thanks for the report. Can you just say briefly what the proposed project is, or the preferred project? And I'm particularly curious about the alignment and whether you're proposing to deliver water directly to Bethany Reservoir or to Clifton Court.
Yes, the project is the Bethany Reservoir alternative, which is an alignment that diverts water as few intakes in the North Delta on the Sacramento River. And then the tunnel alignment generally stays close to I-5 for much of the route through the Delta. And then rather than having the large southern forebay complex that is in some of the other alternatives, it has a pump station that pumps water from the tunnels directly up into Bethany Reservoir, which is essentially a wide spot on the California aqueduct. So by moving it into the Bethany Reservoir, that eliminates the need for that southern forebay, and our analysis found that reduced the potential effects to wetlands and waters, which will be important particularly as we go through the Section 404 permitting, which looks at impacts to wetlands and waters in a creaky way. So that is the preferred alternative, or it's not the preferred alternative, it's the proposed project, and I wanted to highlight a couple things. Well, first, it has a capacity of 6,000 CFS, but I wanted to highlight what it to be the proposed project in the draft EIR, and I wanted to make sure we're really clear that it does not mean that we have selected that alternative to move forward, or even that we've selected any action alternative to move forward. CEQA case law requires that the project proponent identify their current thinking, essentially, in the draft EIR about a proposed project. And because this has the potential to reduce its effects, we are identifying the Bethany alternative as the proposed project. But we recognize that that could change based on comments we receive on the draft EIR, so we're trying to make sure that everyone understands that things could change as we move forward. And it also doesn't represent a decision to move forward that will not be made until after the final EIR.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any more questions in the room? Or anybody online with questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you very much for the update. We're very appreciative. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. All right, now
So that brings
you're
us,
up.
yes, we're in the home stretch. Just a note that we do 5 board meetings a year, so our last board meeting in 2022 will be October 26th, so we will not have one in September, just a reminder. Just a couple things for potential agenda items. We will do an update on our implementation plan, that long-promised carbon management overview. There may be additional community grant agreement to be considered. And then we really want to try to get some sort of project site visit happening as well. And we hope very much to have full video capabilities for our hybrid process here at the board meeting. Jessica, did you have something again?
The Prop 1 Ulatis Creek Award.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, let's add that. Anything else?
Can I ask that discussion be merged, be separated into two? One, that we get an overview from Nicole just on the language that we could possibly use for this project and future projects, and then go into the specific project there at Ulatis Creek.
Yeah, one a policy discussion and the second
Correct.
project award. Yeah.
Correct.
I'll put that in as a directive.
Thank you.
And certainly open to any other ideas that board members have about things they'd like to have covered or anything else of interest.
You'll continue to keep us apprised of the drought relief.
Absolutely. Yeah, that should be on here. We're going to have a conversation about that process and how we're going to run it at the October board meeting.
Okay.
The solicitation will be open at that point, but still we want to make sure we're all in alignment about how we'll move
Yeah, and it was pretty intensive, and again, I know that there was, a committee spent a lot of time reviewing those applications. Again, much thanks to the folks that participated, certainly staff did, and then we got the almost daily updates at some time, and so you have a little more time in there. But I do think that, so your board's aware, but also if there's some assistance we can offer, whatever that might be, I think, Campbell.
That would be great. We'll bring back sort of the architecture of the program and how we hope to move forward at the October meeting.
All right, well, that brings us to a second opportunity for some public comment. If there's anybody online who has any comments for the good of the order or the board? Hearing none? All right, well, then I'll adjourn this meeting until October.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job, Mr. Chair.